Thank you, Chairman Cardin. And Senator Kane, I want to thank you very much for that insightful question. I would just like to add one thing because your time did run over, but I think I'd love to continue this conversation. I took a hard look at this when I served on a volunteer basis helping the transition process in government. And back when, during the 41st presidency, when General Scowcroft was running the NSC, the size of the NSC staff, and Steve, you'll help me with this, was about 50 to 70 people. I looked at it again in 2016, it was about 450. So that's a massive expansion, just if you look at the numbers alone. And so I think that we ought to constantly think about this and the scope of our thought process here as we envisioning, reimagining, I guess, our diplomacy going into the 21st century, because the coordinating function, I agree with Dr. Slaughter, certainly runs a great risk of being overwhelmed with the driving function when you get an entity of that size. So thank you for raising that, and I would encourage us to keep that in mind as we move forward. I'd like to open with a question for Secretary Biegun. Inertia is the most powerful force in the universe. And you mentioned in your testimony the fact that opinions can be long held, interests can be vested, change is challenging. You've had the experience in the corporate world and a deep experience here in government dealing with the challenge of affecting change. But I'd like to ask you first, over 41 years since the last time this act was redone, much has happened. And in that context, what would you perceive as the risk if we do not affect change at this point in time?
Yes, thank you, Senator. 41 years is much too long. Just nearest and dearest to me, one of the most pressing issues I confronted as the Deputy Secretary of State was the COVID-19 pandemic. That was the second global pandemic since 1980 that the United States has endured. The HIV/AIDS pandemic took the lives of 700,000 Americans. It's largely believed that virus originated in Africa. And the COVID-19, which is largely believed to have originated in China, has taken the life of 600,000 Americans. And yet in 2020, when it came time to respond to that pandemic, we had to build it on the fly. We were building the plane as we were flying it. Now, the State Department and its incredible talent can overcome a lot of obstacles, but still something like a retired diplomatic corps like Ambassador Rees recommended would have been of enormous benefit to us, especially if people had experience in these things. But we need our diplomats out there at the front lines of where issues like global pandemics arise. And that's just one issue of dozens of issues that the nation is left exposed if we don't have a more agile and responsive diplomacy. And so I was sobered by my experience as deputy, and I think that this kind of thoughtful reform and restructuring of the department can give us tools to respond to the crises of the future in a much better way.
Thank you. I'd just like to follow up with another point to both yourself, Secretary Biegun, and to Dr. Slaughter. You both have spoken about the need to form a commission. I'd love to get your input. We may not have enough time today to do this, but both in terms of the process and the composition of that commission, I agree with the notion to be bold. Dr. Slaughter, you referred to the roadmap already being in place from the Goldwater-Nichols Act, and I think that we would benefit greatly from the learning and the experience that you all have studied as we think about a commission going forward. I'd love to get your comments. I'll start with you, Secretary Biegun.
Thank you, Senator. So a commission can be a very useful way to do this, and I was here for the Goldwater-Nichols process and saw the enormous impact that it had on the structure of our Defense Department. It was and is a lasting improvement in our defense, and probably helped us prevail in the Cold War because of its effectiveness. We do need a similar thing, but that wasn't done outside of the work of the Armed Services Committee. It was done with the Armed Services Committee. And my only appeal would be that this committee maintain its leadership role and its counterpart in the House in trying to affect that kind of change. You can rely upon that broad set of expertise, and I agree completely with Dr. Slaughter. This is not something that the State Department or the State Department career officials alone can resolve. This has to have outside perspective and from every dimension of American society. But this committee has to play a leading role if that is going to be a successful effort.
Well put. I agree with that. Dr. Slaughter, we're running at the end of time, but a quick comment would be most appreciated.
Well, I can be quick because I completely agree on two things. One, absolutely, Congress has to stay actively involved. Goldwater Nichols had the Center for Strategic and International Studies driving part of it, but the committees drove it. And two, yes, it will only work if this is a congressional commission that then turns into legislation and not yet another report that gets read but not implemented.
Thank you.